and the public pay dearly. We've seen tolling authorities in Maine and Florida, Pennsylvania, involved in various scandals and cases of corruption. And in my home state, our home state of New Jersey, we have reached crisis levels. Now, I'm not against tolling, nor am I against tolling authorities. I am proud to be a former commissioner of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. The Port Authority has built some of the greatest transportation projects in our country. These projects change the Northeast, and New Jersey would not be the vibrant state it is today if we failed to make these investments. But when I was a commissioner, the toll to cross our bridges and tunnels was $2. In today's money, it would be slightly more than $5. But today, the Port Authority tolls are out of control. It now costs $12 to cross between New Jersey and New York, and it's short of a mile long in the Port Authority and the George Washington Bridge. When it costs $12 to drive your car across the bridge in America, something is wrong. The toll increase that we've just seen in the Port Authority took the toll from $8 to $12. Now, if one goes to work every day, crossing that bridge, it's $80 a month, roughly, increase in cost. Beside the fact that people, when they get there, have the cost of parking, etc. It's an enormous cost bite on those who are working and commuting to their jobs. Worse yet, there are allegations of patronage and dysfunction at the Port Authority that leaves drivers wondering what they're paying for. And the process that led to these toll hikes took place largely behind closed doors. The public was given conflicting information about the reason for the toll increase. And at the very least, people deserve to know exactly what their money is going for, and that it will be spent well. Questions were also raised about who was involved in the decision to raise tolls and when they approved the toll increase. Voters can't hold elected leaders accountable for their unpopular decisions when those leaders are hiding behind closed doors. There has also been allegations of out-of-control political patronage at the Port Authority, where substantial positions with six-figure salaries were given to former political bloggers, local mayors, and others with questionable credentials. No wonder an independent audit called the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and I quote him, a challenged and dysfunctional organization. Unfortunately, this isn't the end of the bad news for New Jersey commuters. A recent New Jersey comptroller investigation revealed major abuses at the Delaware River Port Authority in South Jersey. According to the state controller, DERPA wasted millions of toll revenues by allowing the authority to be used like a personal ATM for those with connections to the commissioners. $500,000 of toll money went to an insurance brokerage firm that did no work for the authority. $500,000 for no work. And millions more were directed to economic development projects that provided no transportation or economic benefits. As the interest in tolling expands across the country, we've got to examine the practices of these authorities and ensure proper oversight. Now, whether it's the ability of commuters to get to work or the ability of freight to move on our highways, these tolls have an enormous impact on our lives and should face rigorous scrutiny. It's our job to ensure that the tolls are just and reasonable and that future tolls are imposed with proper protections in place to protect computers. And that's why I call for a GAO study to examine the practices of interstate tolling authorities and introduce the Commuter Protection Act to restore federal oversight of tolling practices. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses on current tolling practices and what we can do to take steps to improve oversight and accountability. And I'm pleased to be joined here today with our colleague, Senator Wicker. Senator Wicker, your opening statement, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our distinguished panelists today. Tolling is an issue that deserves the attention of this subcommittee, particularly as we continue to push for a long-term transportation reauthorization. Tolling should be part of this discussion, as it is an important part of how we fund and maintain one of the nation's most critical transportation projects. This committee has historic jurisdiction with regard to the tolling of bridges and tunnels, and that will be the focus of today's hearing. But clearly, tolling and user fees have a much wider application in funding transportation infrastructure. With an economy that is still struggling to regain its footing, it is of the utmost importance that the nation's drivers not be subject to unfair or overly burdensome toll rate increases. Likewise, our nation's trucking industry has an interest in ensuring that toll rates are set at an appropriate level, especially as the trucking sector seeks to remain competitive with gas prices continuing to climb upwards. I think it's also important that we maintain the state's prerogative to set proper toll rates. So I'm interested in hearing perspectives from all the witnesses on this morning's panel about the various proposals for tolling regulation. I supported the Senate's bipartisan transportation reauthorization bill, and I look forward to going to conference with the House, we hope, on this critical legislation. Not only do major transportation projects generate economic activity for decades to come, but they also put people to work immediately in the construction industry, an industry that is suffering the effects of our slow economic recovery. Looking ahead, we must start thinking about a longer-term bill that will take transportation funding beyond 2013. Historically, transportation bills have been 6 years in length, and I'm hopeful we will move back to that longer model in the next Congress so that states can once again have the certainty for planning that comes with a longer-term reauthorization. This approach will present challenges and difficult choices for lawmakers, and particularly as revenues flowing to the Highway Trust Fund flatten and even decline. I expect we will continue to have hearings in this subcommittee that will inform the many decisions that must be made to pass a longer-term bill, and today's hearing on tolling is a good start. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All kinds of instructions. I come from a technology background, but I'm not sure on how to turn on the light. So we have today's witnesses. We're pleased that you're here and look forward to hearing from you. Mr. Bill Baroni has a significant position in the management of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. It's a great agency, and we're expecting that we'll have a chance to discuss the Port Authority's tolling practices. Chris Plush, and Vice President of Public Affairs for AAA, and he'll be discussing the impact of tolling on the traveling public. Steve Grabeau, Chief Financial Officer in National Freight. We look to you, sir, for the trucking industry's perspective. And Mr. Conte, Eugene Conte, is North Carolina's Secretary of Transportation, and we look forward to your testimony on behalf of the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. And with that, Mr. Baroni, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senator Wicker. Senator Wicker, I have to apologize. It is very rare to come to the United States Senate and be able to address the chairman with a title even greater than Senator, and that is, of course, Commissioner Lautenberg. It is good to see you. Commissioner Lautenberg spent 4 years at our great Port Authority. And, Senator, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here. And and I look forward to our discussion on a number of topics that you raised. But as you said, back in the summer of 2011, the Port Authority did indeed face a crisis. We faced a crisis because over the years preceding that, decisions were made and the economy reached a point where the revenues at the Port Authority were down to $2.6 billion. Our activity levels at our crossings were down. We had decades of wasteful spending that preceded us. Our cost of borrowing was up. We had invested in the decades leading up to my arrival at the Port Authority. We had invested in real estate investments that, quite frankly, were either losing money or certainly a drain on the agency. And we had a series of federal mandates, largely unfunded, that caused the Port Authority to get to the point where we were facing a crisis. And we did everything we could to push that decision back. We had 3 straight flat operating budgets. In fact, since Governor Christie came into office, the actual operating expenses year to year since I got to the Port Authority is down $33 million. We have the lowest number of full-time employees at the Port Authority since the 1940s. Since I came into office with Governor Christie and Chairman Sampson, we have 243 less people working at the Port Authority. We've cut $10 million out of the salary line of the budget. But even with all those decisions, we still face looming transportation questions. We had a Bayonne bridge. We have a Bayonne bridge, and Senator, you and Senator Menendez, Senator Schumer, and Senator Gillibrand jointly signed a letter urging the federal government to help us raise that Bayonne bridge. The Goethals Bridge, linking Elizabeth and Staten Island. Anybody who's ever driven it knew we needed to spend well more than $1 billion. The Lincoln Tunnel helix that takes people into the Lincoln Tunnel each and every day needed to be rehabbed. Hadn't happened in 70 years. The George Washington Bridge, the most iconic bridge perhaps certainly in the world. The suspender ropes in the project needed $1.8 billion of capital spending. The Harrison Path Station, built in the 1930s. Anyone who's traveled, in fact, Mayor McDonough and I were there in Harrison. You look at that train station, we need to build a new one. We had our state of good repair projects. Christopher Street Path Station needed a new substation. We had to do all of that, and at the same time, we had thousands of men and women, construction workers, iron workers, bricklayers, operating engineers, laborers, who needed jobs. And the projects that we were prepared to do, that we didn't have the money to do, would employ 16,000 people. So we were forced to propose a toll increase. But we didn't just do a blanket toll increase as agencies and, quite frankly, the Port Authority had done in the past. We tried to create a progressive tolling structure that valued the things that we look for in New York and New Jersey. We wanted to encourage easy pass driving. We wanted to encourage carpooling. We wanted to encourage people to drive green cars. We wanted to encourage our truckers to travel off-peak or overnight. So we created a tolling structure that gave discounts right now under our tolling structure. If you are a vehicle, if you're a car, and you drive during peak Easy Pass, you get a 21% discount. If you drive off-peak and it's a 37% discount. If you've got a green car, 67% discount. If you're in a carpool, 71% discount. For people who use the Staten Island bridges multiple times, 50%. And for our trucks, because we know trucking drives much of our economy in New York and New Jersey. If you're a truck today, and you've got an Easy Pass, and you drive off-peak, it's a 31% discount. If you drive during peak, 23% discount with an Easy Pass. If you drive overnight with an Easy Pass, it's a 42% discount. And if you do more than 100 trips, a big business like my friend here, you're going to get an extra 10%. We did that. We did that because we know how difficult this is. And we built a process for that toll, and I know, Senator, you mentioned it, the most number of public hearings ever for a Port Authority toll increase. We had 10 public hearings, an online public hearing. More than 1,500 people turned out. More than 500 people spoke. And what resulted? A toll plan that's going to put 16,000 people to work. A toll plan that's going to fix that infrastructure. A toll plan that values environmental justice, values Easy Pass, values Green Pass, values carpool. And we did it in the most open and transparent ever in the history of the Port Authority. That is a process that worked. It's hard to raise tolls. It's difficult to raise tolls. It is harder to have the George Washington Bridge suspender ropes needing to be replaced. It's harder not to have the Lincoln Tunnel rehab for the helix. It's harder to have a Harrison train station that's not disabled accessible. That's what we did, and we did it in an open and transparent manner. I look forward to the questions.
You're finished with your testimony?
Well, Senator, the good folks who talked to me said when that 5 minutes hit, I should stop, and I'm going to listen to the directions I'm told. When Ian tells me 5 minutes and shut up, I'm going to shut up.
We haven't said that yet. Anyway, if you're completed what you testimony that you wanted to bring to it.
Well, Senator, I'm happy to continue. I wanted to condense it, but it strikes me that you have more questions for me.
We just used your extra time, so.
Okay, thank you, Senator.
We'll go on now to our next witness, Mr. Grable. We'd like to hear from you and get your view on the trucking industry's perspective.
Well, thank you, and I'll try to subscribe to my 5-minute limit as well, Bill. Chairman Lautenberg, Senator Wicker, thank you for inviting me to testify on behalf of the American Trucking Associations. As the CFO of a diversified trucking company with extensive operations in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, I'm deeply concerned about the significant increases in toll costs that have been imposed on NFI and other trucking companies over the past few years. Last year alone, my company paid $14 million in tolls. These added costs have forced us to reroute our trucks to less efficient secondary roads, which raises our costs and increases congestion and safety concerns. In addition to the impact increased tolls have on logistics providers, the added costs associated with toll increases filter down to the consumer and affect business decisions regarding hiring and facility locations and equipment and expansion. The trucking industry recognizes that the resources available for highway maintenance and improvement are well short of what is needed, and we are willing to contribute more, provided the money is invested wisely. However, we do not believe that tolls are necessarily an efficient way to fund highway projects, particularly when they are imposed on previously toll-free highways. We are especially concerned when tolling authorities use toll revenue for projects and programs that contribute little or no value to the motorists who are paying the fees. Unfortunately, some of these authorities have demonstrated a disregard for their customers in terms of rate-setting practices, governance, and expenditure of toll revenue. At least where toll facilities serve interstate traffic, we believe that federal oversight and possible intervention in determining toll rates is necessary and appropriate. While there are many examples of irresponsible actions by tolling authorities that merit federal attention, I would like to cite 2 examples which have been brought to light by recent state audits: the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and the Delaware River Port Authority. Last year, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey announced massive increase in toll rates on its 6 bridges and tunnels connecting New Jersey and New York City. By 2015, the cash truck toll rate will increase by 163% to $105. This is nearly 3 times greater than the country's next highest bridge toll rate. Throughout the process of instituting the rate increases, the Port Authority's public involvement and disclosure practices were abysmal. During its so-called public outreach process, the Port Authority did not disclose how the additional revenue will be spent, and to this date has refused to make that information public. It appears, however, that the vast majority of the revenue will be directed to projects that have no benefit for toll payers. Instead, most of the money will be used to benefit seaports and airports and to complete the reconstruction of the World Trade Center office buildings. Mr. Chairman, a recent audit described the Port Authority as dysfunctional and questioned management's ability to effectively and prudently operate the organization. It's clear that federal oversight of the authority, which was created through an interstate compact by Congress, is necessary and appropriate. If possible, the Delaware River Port Authority, also a federally authorized body, may be even more dysfunctional and similarly in need of federal oversight, of course, until Bill got involved. According to a recent audit, for a period of at least 10 years, the authority violated many of its own policies and procedures, particularly those related to its spending practices. The audit also suggested that state officials who were supposed to be providing oversight were instead benefiting from these violations and had little incentive to prevent these practices from occurring. We are most concerned about the expenditure of $440 million in economic development funds at the expense of critical bridge maintenance and improvement projects. These expenditures are in direct violation of the authority's compact, which prohibits expenditure of funds on economic development projects if sufficient money is not available for bridge projects. In fact, the authority actually had to take on additional debt to pay for the economic development projects even as it was cutting back on funding for bridge projects. Mr. Chairman, we greatly appreciate your introduction of the Commuter Protection Act, which was sponsored by Senator Menendez. ATA believes it is a significant step towards ensuring better oversight of tolling authorities that serve interstate traffic. Congress has an obligation under the Constitution's Commerce Clause to ensure that interstate travelers who may not be represented when toll rate setting and spending decisions are made to have a voice in these processes. As such, since the early part of the 20th century, federal law has required that toll rates for certain bridges should be just and reasonable. Unfortunately and unintentionally, the authority to enforce this requirement has eroded. The Commuter Protection Act will correct this oversight. We look forward to working with the subcommittee to pass federal legislation that curtails tolling authority abuses, ensures that the public is treated fairly with a transparent process that takes the interests of interstate travelers into account. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ploshin. We'd like to hear from you. I understand you're the Vice President for Public Affairs, AAA, and we'd like your view on what's happening with tolls.
Thank you very much, Chairman Lautenberg and Senator Wicker, for the opportunity to testify here today. To put our tolling policy and positions in context, AAA believes the success of any tolling plan is first that motorists must be assured that tolls they pay are fair and equitable. The process for setting these toll rates is transparent and open, and that the revenues derived are utilized to improve the corridor or facility from which they are collected. As a general principle, AAA opposes tolling the existing interstate, but we also recognize that tolling to provide new capacity is among the future solutions that will help us increase capacity and manage congestion. AAA has done periodic polling on the topic of transportation funding and specifically tolling in particular. And naturally, it would come to no one's surprise that no one really wants to pay more. But what we've found is that the public is generally more supportive of the concept of a user-pays system. And then that support can translate to tolling on the principle that toll revenues collected would be solely dedicated towards the transportation improvements for that particular facility. But once that direct link is severed, the public acceptance will plummet. The Office of the New Jersey State Comptroller said as much, recently detailing the actions of the Delaware River Port Authority, stating that toll payers have borne a financial burden attributable to years of mismanagement and neglect. Over 15,000 AAA members registered their complaints to the DRPA board for raising tolls and spending revenues on items unrelated to transportation improvements. If tolling is to fulfill its role as part of the solution to financing our infrastructure needs, tolling proposals must provide the public with recognizable improvements for their traveling experience. Instead, the public is being asked to pay more and more, and in return, given less and less. The daily commuter, AAA member, the small businessman, traveler is being squeezed and developing a sense of futility because they feel that they have no voice in the process, and in many cases, they don't. Going forward, what can we do better, and what kinds of safeguards should be in place to ensure the public good is being served? Toll rates need to have a sound economic basis to reflect the actual cost of improvements to the system, and capital plans should be included as part of the overall scope. A sufficient amount of time needs to be established between the development of the tolling proposal, the public hearings, and final approval so that all portions of the plan can be fully vetted. Public hearings on tollings need to be held at a variety of locations and times, especially to ensure that there is broader public acceptance. And tolling authorities should make annual disclosures of their financial status and the progress of the debt retirement for the tolled facilities within their jurisdictions. Before concluding, Mr. Chairman, I want to take the opportunity to state AAA's support for your legislation, the Commuter Protection Act, and to thank you for your leadership on the issue of toll fairness and revenue protection. Your bill will reinforce the definition of just and reasonable as the standard for tolls and reassert the needed accountability and oversight for the process. Further, today I'd like to submit a letter sent yesterday from AAA's CEO, Bob Darbelnay, to the Executive Director of the Easy Pass Interagency Work Group. Various AAA clubs have heard from their members with complaints about unfair and unequal treatment for those with Easy Pass transponders. And it appears that Easy Pass holders are being charged different amounts based on which authority issued their transponder or which state they were issued that. AAA believes charging out-of-state drivers a higher toll rate violates the underlying promise of Easy Pass, which is to provide the public with a seamless, accurate, and interoperable electronic method of paying tolls and fees. And with that, I will conclude my remarks in 4 minutes, and thank you again for the time today.
We didn't stop you to pay any tolls.
It was a fast
Just
trip.
Get going. Anyway, thanks very much. Mr. Conti, we look forward to hearing from you now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Wicker for giving me the opportunity to share the state policy perspectives on the use of tolling as a menu of part of a menu of revenue options for surface transportation. And I have submitted a longer statement for the record. I'm testifying on behalf of the American Association of Highway and Transportation Officials, which represents all the state's transportation departments. 2 federal commissions and a number of recent studies have demonstrated and documented that we have a significant investment deficit. I think both of you referenced that in your opening comments. A significant investment deficit in surface transportation infrastructure at all levels of government. We have a sizable portfolio of financing mechanisms that could be utilized to supplement more traditional grant funding, which supports investments in transportation infrastructure. And one of the most useful has proven to be tolling options. AASHTO developed the Board of Directors, which is all the state CEOs, recommends adopting a diversified portfolio of revenue options, including tolling, to meet program funding needs. And to this end, we believe the Congress should support flexible national policies that use both conventional and innovative financing tools. For example, federal limitations should be removed on the ability of state and local governments to raise toll revenues and to apply those revenues to transportation projects and activities within the same corridor or region as the tolled facility. At the same time, we recognize that states must continue to deliver on the need for accountability and transparency. Under the Interstate Reconstruction and Rehabilitation Pilot Program, which was authorized under T21, it allows 3 existing interstate facilities to be tolled. This tool holds tremendous promise given the backlog of reconstruction and rehabilitation needs in the interstate system. And 3 states, including my home state of North Carolina, along with Missouri and Virginia, have been approved by the Federal Highway Administration to proceed with those pilots. We have addressed very directly the issues of transparency, accountability, and equity in our pilot program, and I know Virginia is in particular doing the same thing to make sure that we are studying all the issues around tolling Interstate 95 through North Carolina. We have spent 30 months, 2.5 years, to reach out to affected communities and users of the I-95 corridor through social media, through a dedicated website, through editorial board meetings, through structured workshops with stakeholder groups and the public, 7 public hearings, 7 informational workshops. We've gone beyond the traditional project development process by adding an additional step to assess the economic impact along the corridor of the potential tolling of I-95. And let me say very directly that our governor has not decided whether to move forward with this initiative, but we are doing the detailed work that needs to be done in a transparent way to make that decision openly and with all the facts on the table. Let me conclude by just commenting on the Commuter Protection Act. Our concerns from a state perspective are an insertion of new federal oversight and uncertainty into what has traditionally been a state and local process for setting toll rates. We would resist the idea of direct federal decision-making for tolling. We have no problem with the federal involvement as is, where we work with the Federal Highway Administration on new tolling proposals and to make sure that we follow those rules of transparency and accountability that I talked about. But to lose the ability of states and localities to make these decisions and to have another step in the process of federal approval and decision-making, we think would discourage the role of tolls and innovative finance, and particularly create an impediment for private investment in infrastructure projects. So we think the most appropriate role for the Secretary is to stay within that broader federal policy framework and to continue to provide the guidance and counsel that we've had in the past. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks very much, Mr. Conti. I want to take a look at what's happened, Mr. Baroni, with recent toll increases. Cars paying $12, drivers paying $12 in cash, or nearly $10 with Easy Pass to cross the Port Authority bridges and tunnels. Trucks have to pay as much as $65 to cross. The question is, did the size of the increase strike those of you who make the decision at the Port Authority as being fair? I mean, that's a substantial 50% increase to cross the bridge. That's a lot of money.
Senator, thank you for the question, and I know that the conversation, we heard some of my colleagues talking about how much it is, but as I described before, Senator, that if you are a cash-paying, non-Easy Pass using, rush hour driving truck, you are causing the most challenges physically to our crossings for every fully loaded tractor trailer that goes across our bridges. It's 10,000 times the damage to our bridges as one car. But one of the reasons we built all of the discounts in, Senator, is to be able to those folks who are commuting, who have an Easy Pass, who are driving off-peak. And Senator, respectfully, I understand the concerns that people have about paying tolls across the Hudson. It is something that commuters, as you mentioned, Senator, each and every day. But respectfully, Senator, you only started paying tolls recently. For years, Senator, as a former commissioner of my agency, you received free Easy Pass. Year after, in fact, I have a copy of your free Easy Pass. I've got letters from 01.
How often was it used, do you know?
Well, yeah, actually. 01, 02, 03.
What? How many times?
Well, I can tell you. Without.
Well, I'm not going to permit you to continue with this silliness.
Well, Senator, you took 284 trips for free in the last 2 years you have.
I want you to answer this question.
Sure.
Is this fair? Is this toll increase fair to the public at large?
I think, Senator, for those
talk
people,
about the individual cars, then we can talk about
cars.
truckers.
Certainly.
I want to keep you on track. So,
Senator, it's impossible. Certainly, Senator, it is impossible to argue fairness in tolls if you don't pay them. So the people who are driving vehicles across the Hudson River each and every day, we give discounts for Easy Pass peak, discounts for Easy Pass off peak. We give discounts for carpools. We give discounts for Green Pass.
Have the discounts worked? Has
Sure.
it leveled off the usage on the facilities?
It has. We're now up to 81% of our facilities use Easy Pass. Vehicles who cross the bridges and tunnels is 81%. We're up 4% Easy Pass use since since August of last year.
You talked about trucks. You talked about.
Well, you asked me to talk about vehicles.
Yeah, vehicles, trucks. I'm talking about the whole assemblage of people who use those bridges and tunnels and
about 81%. 81% of the people who will go through the tolls at the Port Authority crossings will use an Easy Pass that they pay for.
Yeah. How do you get an Easy Pass?
Well, there's a variety of ways to get an Easy Pass. You can go online and get an Easy Pass.
No, what do you pay for an Easy Pass?
I think the number is it's $20-some. I can get back to you on the exact number.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is that if you've got the extra money, you get a little bit of privilege. And
I'm not sure what you mean by
right.
Easy Pass is not a privilege.
I'm going to conduct this hearing, and I'll give you adequate time to respond. I promise you that. You flooded us with all the things that were wrong in the past, and to pull out that little thing that I got after serving in the Port Authority for 4 years. I don't even think about using it, Mr. Baroni.
Of course not, because we took it away, Senator.
Well, what happened? What happens? It was there. That's what they did, and that's what I took. And I'm not going to defend it. That's a silly thing to bring into this. I want to discuss your direction of this grand agency and where the money is gone and why the increases were so large. What is that? Is that fair play in your view? Why did the administration that we have in office now cancel $6 billion worth of money that we raised through this place to build a tunnel and get 22,000 cars a day off the road? You want to talk about those things? Or are we going to stay on the subject as I, now the chairman of this subcommittee, will lay them out for you?
Senator, I'm prepared to talk about anything you'd like.
Yeah, you're prepared to talk about a lot of things that aren't relevant to the discussion. Can't hear me? I'll make it louder, I promise you. So is $12 for a crossing fair?
Is $12 for a crossing if you don't have an Easy Pass, therefore you're backing our traffic up?
Yeah, if you don't have the money to buy an Easy Pass, right?
If you're traveling on Easy Pass and you're going during peak rush hour and you don't have an Easy Pass, given the fact that 81% of the people who do our crossings have an Easy Pass, and given the fact, for every 10% that we can move people.
How do you go to work? You live in New Jersey.
I do. I live in Hamilton, New Jersey. I take the train. Sometimes I drive.
Oh, you take the train.
Sure.
That's
sometimes I drive.
Because otherwise you could wait a half an hour to cross the bridge or the tunnels or things of that nature.
That's true, because not enough people are using Easy Pass.
Instead of taking advantage of the opportunity to build more rail transportation there, what you did is you laid it all over the commuters, those who the truckers who need to have that kind of access. So I want you to answer the question. Do you think it's fair?
Is it fair for someone who doesn't have an Easy Pass? Is it fair for a truck that's causing 10,000
No,
crossings?
I didn't ask you that. I asked you if it's fair for a passenger and going to work in a car.
But
is it fair?
A passenger going to work in a car, commuting by car, the statistics of Easy Pass use are even higher. They're not paying that. They're doing an Easy Pass discount. So, Senator, but for someone who doesn't get an Easy Pass and is backing our traffic up at the Lincoln Tunnel this morning, yes, it's fair.
The person who doesn't have the money to buy an Easy Pass is
some people don't get them given to them, Senator.
As you cross the bridge.
I didn't understand, sir.
When your response to the question is.
In fact, Senator, I've just been handed some information, so I want to correct something I said. You don't have to pay for an Easy Pass. All you need is a prepaid balance on Easy Pass for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey.
Are you kidding? What do you mean a balance? Where does the balance come from? Does it come out of your pocket? Does it come out of your?
Yes, and when you're done using the Easy Pass, you get it back.
You get what back? You get the cost of the card back?
The Easy Pass?
Yeah.
You put a
Easy Pass gives you a $9.50 ride, right?
Depending on the time of day, but okay.
$12. $9.50 ride with Easy Pass.
Okay. You're talking a peak hour Easy Pass, yeah?
Yeah. $9.50. Is it fair to the person who doesn't have an Easy Pass to pay $12? Is it fair to someone who puts up their money in advance to pay $9.50? Is it a fair rate in your judgment?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
Okay.
Given the given the world that we
to those
inherited,
who need the bridges and tunnels to commute, pay up. When did the governor approve of the minutes that raised the toll?
Yes, of course.
He approved.
You know that,
So he
Senator.
knew about it. You didn't surprise him with something.
When he got
Say,
the minutes?
Hey,
No.
Here's what we got. Tomorrow we'd like to raise.
When the governor got the minutes of the meeting, no.
Both
Governor Cuomo.
He got advance.
Governor Cuomo and Governor Christie got the minutes of the meeting, and they did not veto them. That's exactly right. Well, you know that, Senator, because when you were on the commission...
Don't tell me what I did. I want to know what
you can't, Senator, you can't ignore the
I'm going to
past.
keep you on path whether you like it or not. You don't have an easy pass. You are there in the chair at our request, and we expect you not to give us a song and dance, but to answer the question specifically, okay? So I'm asking you, when did the governor get word of the fact that you were going to boost the rail?
Well, Senator, I'm not going to get into conversations that I have with
no, you don't.
administration.
You have, my friend.
I'm just not going to, Senator. I'm not going to start having conversations with who I talk to.
You're refusing to answer the question.
Senator, I'm not going to have
You're
conversations.
refusing to answer the question.
Senator, I'm not going to talk about conversations that I have with different administration
This isn't
officials.
a conversation. You can't. Are you running a protection agency there?
Excuse me?
Talk straight about what went on. And I ask you a simple question, and you say you're not going to discuss it. You have to discuss it. You're an important executive at that agency. You work for the people, whether you think so or not. And the fact of the matter is, I want to know when the governor knew when the rates.
Well, as you said before, Senator,
that wasn't
I'll
your
clarify
private
it.
conversation. You can't use the private conversation.
Well, Senator,
It's a public effort.
You asked me the direct question before. The governor and Governor Cuomo received the minutes of the meeting and they approved the toll increases by not vetoing. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So they knew what was coming. That was not what I would call an easy pass. The decision to raise the toll, of course, was the governor's decision to raise that toll. An external audit released after the toll hike went into effect called the authority a dysfunctional organization. Tolls are scheduled to rise even higher in coming years, reaching $15 a car to enter Manhattan in 2015. Will you agree to delay the additional toll increases until a subsequent external audit finds the Port Authority has fully resolved the issues raised in the initial audit?
Well, obviously, I can't sit here, Senator, and commit to something that the board does or does not do. I can tell you that through what you're referring to is the Navigant report that was called for by Governor Christie and Governor Cuomo at the time of the tolls. And in that report, they said the Port Authority had become dysfunctional. And it is impossible to argue with that conclusion. For decades, the Port Authority had moved away, in many ways, from its core mission, investing in projects that don't have to do, and this is something the Navigant report points out, investing in projects that don't have to do with its core mission, had done over the decades wasteful, reckless spending, and had developed a system of compensation and benefits that was completely out of whack with the rest of the public sector and certainly the private sector. And as a result of that, at our last board meeting, Chairman Sampson and Vice Chairman Reckler led the board in getting rid of all of those compensation and benefit, all of them, and over the next 18 months saving $41 million for the agency. In addition, to a series of reforms that this agency has put into place, including the first new outside auditor, including the leadership that we've had on making people contribute to health care. These are the kind of reforms, and getting out of these bad real estate deals, and starting to get out of deals that we should never have been in the first place, and selling and getting rid of these wasteful spending. I mean, Senator, I came into office in March of 2010. We were about to celebrate, I guess we're 89 years, about to celebrate our 90th anniversary of the agency. Over those decades, decisions were made at the Port Authority. For example, to, as I said before, invest in the teleport and create industrial parks
Let's not talk about all those things that were.
You can't say we're dysfunctional and not let me explain why we became dysfunctional.
Yeah, well, you've blamed it on everybody else, and the Bergen record linked Governor Christie in January to offering more than 50 positions to people at the Port Authority. Now, according to the article, many of these employees have six-figure salaries and close ties to the governor, including a former political blogger, a campaign worker, and local mayors, prompting questions about the extent of political patronage at the Port Authority.
Yep.
I want you to supply this committee the names and the positions of these recommendations and their qualifications. We'll give you 2 weeks to do that.
Well, Senator, I'm sure I'm not sure how the last time a senator asked for a list of names, but I'm happy to provide.
What do I care about? Your opinions are really.
You asked me to come here. You asked for my opinion.
But you're not going to do that. I'm asking you
Senator,
to do something. You
Absolutely.
have a direct responsibility to be looking at these things in terms of their need. There's a lot of money that the Port Authority was originally going to put into the tunnel, which was pulled back. $3 billion was the offer that was made to match the federal contribution to the rail tunnel. Nothing happened.
Well, Senator, can I at least address your question about patronage? Because I think it's a fair one, and I appreciate you asking it. So the Bergen Record ran a story back in January, I believe, that talked about 50 political hires that were directed. The story goes were directed by the governor's office. If I could make a couple of points. First of all, the list that the Bergen Record mentioned, the number that the record mentioned, included a list of interns. 11 of them. One of whom is a young man by the name of Robert Menendez Jr., who I understand his dad works around here. He was a graduate of the University of North Carolina, to my friend the secretary, and he worked very hard, and clearly I don't think anyone could say that he's a political appointee, but he was on the list. But I think philosophically that, as Governor Christie has said, governors have the ability, when I showed up at the Port Authority, I was the first Christie person there. And, governors should be able to put people at these agencies who share their values and interests. You may disagree with it, but, Senator, respectfully, over the 8 years before I got there, there were 68 political appointees by Governors Cody, McGreevey, and Corzine. 68. There was never a hearing about that. And one of the reasons I find interesting, and one of the criticisms...
They weren't called dysfunctional at that time.
Senator, you just criticized me for hiring, your words, a campaign staffer. Well, Senator, one of your campaign staffers from 2002 campaign was then hired at the Port Authority she on her resume when she applied to the Port Authority said she ran your U.S. Senate candidate visibility throughout the county and was hired at the Port Authority as an energy specialist. What I find interesting is when Chris Christie and this Port Authority brings somebody on, it's political. When it happens before, it's good government.
You're gonna pick out these things. Robert Menendez Jr., very smart guy, and you're lucky to have him on the job.
That's why I brought him on board.
But why is 1 out of 50? Why does it matter? These little tidbits of things that you're trying to score points with don't register with me. And I'll tell you.
We know they don't register with you.
No, yeah, but you have a responsibility here. You're sitting under oath at that table.
Senator,
you're automatically under oath when you sit at a congressional hearing. And so we want straight talk from you. And when if you want to play little games, Robert Menendez Jr. was hired. He's a very qualified young man.
And that's why I hired him.
Yeah. Well, so that justifies the other 49 is what you're saying.
Senator, I'm happy to go through the list. You want a list?
I've asked you for a list.
You just did.
Of all 50 of those people.
Sure.
And their
would you like to go through it now?
And their backgrounds.
Sure. Should we go through them now? I'm happy to.
You want to go? The impertinence is barely tolerable. But no, I'll give you 3 days to provide it.
Look forward to it.
I'm sorry?
I have no problem.
Okay, fine.
Answering the people that we hired.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that only took us 15 minutes to get to. In January 2011, both Governors Christie and Cuomo informed of the need to raise cash tolls to $12. January 2011. Suddenly in July, the internal proposal drastically jumped to $15. Whose decision was it to raise the toll to $15 when that matures?
I'm not sure what proposal you're talking about, Senator. That was not
The one that is going to take the tolls up to $15 in the year with...
the toll proposal you're talking about?
Yeah.
Well, Senator, the Port Authority did. We put it out as a public notice and full-page ads in the newspaper, and then people came and had public hearings about it that you talked about. And so I'm not... the Port Authority did.
The Port Authority did, with the approval of the governors.
No, as you asked me before, Senator, the governors approved the minutes after the toll increase.
Yeah. Well, so this was something that the Port Authority decided without waiting for any
well, as I said before, Senator, I'm not going to get back and forth into conversations that agencies have with each other, but it's certainly fair to say by me sitting here today that it's the person you want to ask questions about the tolls, so I'm prepared to spend all day talking about them.
So what's the significance of what you just said? What's the significance of that?
The significance, it's a great question.
You're trying to play
a
funny game of table tennis here. I don't like it, obviously. I asked you a question. Who raised it? You said the Port Authority did.
Sure.
You said that the governors hadn't yet seen it. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, again, I'm not going to comment about who saw what and when, but...
Well, you are going to comment.
Well,
you have a responsibility to comment, my friend, whether you like it or not. You're at a table here, and you are compelled to tell the truth to the Congress.
Of course I'm telling the truth, Senator. I've told the truth the whole time.
Yeah.
And an implication, Senator, that somehow I had not told the truth is offensive to me. I take this body and this Senate sacrosanct.
No, the game you're playing with picking out these things, the pass to
Senator,
former Port Authority.
You can't say that we're dysfunctional and somehow the Port Authority became dysfunctional in the 2 months Chris Christie was governor. Senator, we're cleaning it up.
Are you sensitive to that? That suddenly it was declared functional in the last 2 months?
It was because Chris Christie and Andrew Cuomo called for a navigant review of the agency that finally somebody did call it dysfunctional. And it's dysfunctional
by
because...
throwing 50 political appointments in there? Did that help straighten out the dysfunctionality of the agency?
We brought people to this agency passionately believed in reforming it, and we brought people in who took the places in some cases of the very political appointees under Governor McGreevey, Governor Cody, and Governor Corzine that apparently were, in the world here, good government. Because it's political when Chris Christie does it, but apparently it's good government when John Corzine does it. And the dysfunction that we are cleaning up, that we are passionately about cleaning up, that we are making people pay for their health care, that we are we're getting rid of all these benefits.
Just get me the list.
No problem, Senator.
Get me the list. Mr. Gerbel or Mr. Ploshin, to ensure public involvement, the Port Authority is required to hold public hearings on toll increases. Did drivers in New Jersey and New York have sufficient opportunities to air their concerns to the Port Authority, Mr. Ploshin? Mr. Grebo?
My understanding of the public hearings from talking to our AAA club in New York was that they were all held at the same time during rush hour, and that none of the commissioners actually attended any of the public hearings.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mr. Grebo?
with regard to truckers, the best we were able to do is to attend via webinar a particular hearing, and our attendees found that to be a pretty unproductive exercise in light of not being able to hear information proffered by other people on the webinar. So we've generally just looked to rely upon the agencies that support us to try to give us the best support they can. Because again, we're not just looking at this location, but we're looking at dealing with tolling authorities elsewhere as well.
New Jersey Controller issued a scathing report on the practices at the Delaware River Port Authority, again from Mr. Grabol and Mr. Ploshin. According to the report, the authority was treated like an ATM for those who had connections to the board. Do you have any concerns about the diversion of nearly $500,000 in toll revenue that was given to an insurance service company, even though the company did no direct work for the authority?
In reading some of that report, I know there were many things listed in terms of diversion of funds to non-transportation related items. I think the most important item that comes out of that report is that the Port Authority basically ignored its primary responsibility, which was to address the backlog in transportation and infrastructure improvements. Any sort of diversion of funds from toll payers is unacceptable and needs to be addressed, and I think that's why AAA is not anti-tolling, but we do believe that some accountability in the process is needed.
Mr. Grabol?
We would share those thoughts. I mean, obviously, the challenge today is the escalating costs of tolls, and obviously if money is being used for inappropriate purposes, it gives us great concern because this cost escalation is dramatically impacts both us and our shipping customers and ultimately the consumers. So we are very concerned. We recognize that there needs to be revenue to support the highways and the bridges and the tunnels, but certainly diverting money to other inappropriate places does not help the cause at all.
The Delaware River Port Authority borrowed money and delayed needed infrastructure repairs to fund non-transportation economic development projects. Do you think that is appropriate to use those toll revenues for non-transportation programs?
Obviously, Chairman, from our perspective, we find that to be very inappropriate. I mean, the challenge that we have is that we have, we see that there's obviously a need for funds to be raised to support the infrastructure, but for people that are paying those tolls to then have money used for purposes that have nothing to do with helping to make their highways, bridges, tunnels, and other facilities both safer and more efficient, really is essentially burdening them with problems that probably with expenses that probably be borne by a different universe of people.
Mr. Ploshin?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, AAA's would argue that tolls, we know that localities are strapped. We know that, as Secretary Conte pointed out, that, the need for revenue is great. And tolls can be a part of that solution. They're not a panacea. They're not a silver bullet. But they need to be implemented in a way that's fair and reasonable. And the tolling authorities need to be accountable and transparent to those that are paying the rates.
Mr. Peroni, the Port Authority cited declining revenues as one of the major reasons for the drastic toll hike.
Yes, sir.
Shortly before the toll hike, the Port Authority redirected $1.8 billion that was slated for the ARC Tunnel, as you know, to fund the non-Port Authority road projects. How much revenue will be generated by these road projects?
Essentially the same amount that ARC would have generated for the Port Authority.
Same way?
There'd be for the Port Authority's revenue. When you look at the projects that we call it the Lincoln Tunnel Access projects, because there's four of them that are part of the program, but the one that most folks talk about, of course, is the Pulaski Skyway. And Senator, you and I have both many times driven across the Pulaski Skyway, and it was built to be the missing link between the Holland Tunnel and the port. In fact, it wasn't even built by the Port Authority. It was given to the Port Authority after we were founded. It was the first vehicular crossing across the Hudson. The problem is that Pulaski, nearly as soon as it was built, in fact, there's a great book, and Senator, I'll get you the name of the book. One of my former law students read it.
No, you'll probably finish it here, but please go ahead.
Well, we're talking about Pulaski. I was just saying I would recommend the book to you about Pulaski Skyway, that nearly as soon as it was built, it became obvious that it couldn't take trucks. So we have Truck 109 that winds its way through. But you look at Pulaski built in the same manner that the I-35 bridge in Minneapolis, and governor after governor, Senator Lautenberg, you've certainly spoken about this repeatedly, the need to replace Pulaski. The reason why Pulaski will assist the Port Authority is it will do a couple things. It will make a smoother trip to Lincoln. It will help at Holland, and certainly will help at the Helix. So it is a direct link to our facilities, which has been the law in New Jersey forever and New York forever and a day. So that's it's an important project for our interstate network.
So I detect that through all of this discussion that we've just heard is that the non-Port Authority road projects how will they generate the revenue that you said would be the same as that which would be?
Well, remember, ARC was a $3 billion contribution from the Port Authority to the project. The Port Authority's contribution was $3 billion, but the Port Authority was not really going to get revenue out of that project, as you know. But Pulaski, the Pulaski project, Whitpen, Pulaski 1 and 9, we believe will have a benefit to the current crossings at Lincoln, certainly at Lincoln, and at Holland. So we believe it'll be a marginal improvement there. But we're not. No one has made an argument that. And I'm certain, Senator, you're not arguing we should toll the Pulaski.
That wasn't the only non-Port Authority.
There's 4 projects in the same. They're all linked. It's Whitpen, it's Pulaski, it's 1 and 9, and I'll get the 4 of them. I think it's 139. But they're all connected to the Lincoln Tunnel. They're all linked to the Lincoln Tunnel.
Is it transfer of funds? What's the Transportation Trust Fund look like in New Jersey right now?
Senator, it's been 2 years since I've been in the state Senate, so I'm not necessarily the person you should ask that question to.
Well, if the Port Authority was prepared to give $3 billion to the ARC Tunnel, and the state committed to do this program. Do the program. Well,
ARC or Pulaski?
I discussed this directly with the governor, Governor Christie, and he was much behind it as candidate and then as governor. And then suddenly the climate changed, and he killed the tunnel project. And some of that, I think, might have been helpful to the Transportation Trust Fund. Are you aware of that at all?
Senator, all I can speak to is the Port Authority dollars that are going to these 4 projects. Beyond that, it's...
But is that the only place that the 3, you're talking about the $3 billion?
Right. The 4 projects that the Port Authority is participating in are designated for specific projects.
How much money?
1.8.
1.8.
Right.
What then? So how did the 4 projects get designated?
We spent a lot of time with engineers. We spent a lot of time looking.
And who? But these were approved in the minutes of the Port Authority by Governor Christie and Governor Cuomo.
My recollection of the time is this was probably done under Governor Patterson, but I'd have to go back and check.
The ARC Tunnel It would have taken an estimated 22,000 cars off the road, double the number of households in New Jersey that are within 50 minutes of Manhattan. Will the $1.8 billion that was redirected from the ARC tunnel to fund the road projects provide the same levels of benefits for commuters?
Well, again, Chairman, I'm not an expert at that. I can tell you this, that clearly fixing Pulaski, Witt, Penn, 139 will make the flow and traffic and delay in and out of Lincoln and less so in and out of Holland better. But in addition to that, and I think you raise a very, very good point about cross-Hudson rail. And there was a lot of discussion and about when it comes to ARC and Gateway. But the first 4 tunnels that take trains under the Hudson were built by us. Well, built by the Hudson in Manhattan that we bought in the late 1960s and made it the path. And over because of the commitment that previous governors and Governor Christie and Governor Cuomo, we've had an extraordinary investment in path that I think often gets overlooked. I know we're talking about tolls, but I think since we've brought up crossings, we've seen the last couple of weeks a project that has, and the folks who know me at the Port Authority, has been one of the projects I spent a lot of time pushing, and that's a new train station in Harrison. Mayor McDonough, working across party lines, Mayor McDonough in Harrison points out that the Harrison train station needed work. But not only does it need a new station.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Senator, I thought this was important.
Yeah, the terminal at Harrison, and we'll ask for particular documents, and I'm sure that you'll be quick to furnish them. A mail's good rather than verbal. I think we just condense it that way. Thank you all very much for being here.